You stand before a shadowed mansion. Its shuttered windows creak, and something deep within stirs at your approach. Inside, you will find all the answers to your questions, but at what cost? The stage is set. The dice will roll. Dare you cross the darkened threshold?
Hello, listeners. My name is Jason. I am the founder of the Gauntlet gaming community and the creator of the role-playing games Brindlewood Bay and The Between, and I am joined by my co-host and fabulous intro reader and writer.
Why, thank you.
Alex.
Hello, my name is Alex Trubitsky. I'm an actor, voiceover artist, and a fervent player of many tabletop games, especially including The Between and Brindlewood Bay.
I love it. So, listeners, this is The Darkened Threshold. This is our first episode. So I want to tell you that The Darkened Threshold is a role-playing game podcast focused on the mystery and horror genres. We'll be looking at the mystery and horror genres through the lens of the games The Between and Brindlewood Bay. Right now, there's a lot of creative energy around The Between and Brindlewood Bay, and we want this podcast to be a space to explore those two games, as well as games and scenarios derived from them, from both a gameplay and game design perspective, and then connect all those ideas into the broader mystery and horror genres. And we're going to do that each week by having a topic. But before we dive into today's topic, we always want to start by talking about some recent play experiences we've had. So let's go do that now. Alex.
Hello.
Have you had a fantastic play experience lately that you want to talk about?
Oh boy, I have. I went on a vacation not too long ago. I was with some friends. First time really any of us had gamed in person for a very long time, and I busted out Brindlewood Bay.
Nice.
One of them had played before, another was familiar, and then two others had no idea what this game was. But, so we did Dad Overboard, the initial, that first mystery you can have. And it was going pretty normally for the first majority of it. Yeah. I've run Dad Overboard plenty of times now. And this time seemed like all the others up until a point. I'm very much used to, when it comes to the fish market, people, sneaking in.
Right, yeah.
Looking around. Maybe not letting Etienne Beauregard know they are there.
Right, yeah.
What I'm not used to is them trying to Mission Impossible onto the Krause's yacht.
Okay, I want to hear how this goes, because that's certainly not how it's always gone in my games. Listeners, if you're listening to the show, I assume you're familiar with the introductory adventure to Brindlewood Bay. But if not, we're going to talk about Brindlewood Bay more in the next segment. But just for the purposes of this discussion, one of the key things in this introductory scenario is you go talk to the family who are the principal suspects in this murder mystery, and they live on this yacht, or they're staying on this yacht right now. It's parked a mile away in Brindlewood Bay. So normally, I would say most groups just take a boat and get an invite onto the yacht, but it sounds like yours did not.
No. So what happened is that while two mavens were sneaking into the fish market, one was making a scene so that they could sneak into the fish market. And she did this by literally going overboard over the harbor into the water and ended up getting rescued by some hunky lifeguard on duty. And when they told me we'd like to sneak onto the Krause's yacht, the Regal Lady, I said, okay. The boat that the sheriff would let you use is absolutely not going to let you do that stealthily, so what is your plan to get aboard? And the maven who went overboard originally said, I'd like to convince the lifeguard to take us over. And that's what happened. Through this odd display of flirting and bribery, they convinced this himbo lifeguard to take them in the dead of night to the yacht, where they silently pulled up to the side. One of them in their inventory specifically specifically from their cozy little place at the start of character creation, had a grappling hook. And they used that to scale the side of the boat. They got a clue by looking into a porthole to see like a bloody rug.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah.
And then they got on board, they spied on Andrew the butler and essentially decided to split up and start searching different parts of the boat. And this resulted in them sneaking around, finding an illicit exotic fish smuggling ring that essentially was in there as well. It was crazy. It was absolutely wild. And it ended up, they went the entire time on the boat, not seen, and then got their theorize roll, and then revealed themselves to the Krause family by emerging and being like, J'accuse, It was absolutely crazy.
These elderly women have snuck onto your boat and solved
fully
the crime.
Broken onto your, vacation boat. It was fantastic and certainly taught me a lot about expectations.
Yeah, that is definitely not how that normally goes, but I'm glad that players found a good way to find their fun.
It got crazy.
I'm reminded a little bit of so when I was in the Navy, which was a long, long time ago, our job was we were pirate hunters. I was literally a pirate hunter in the Navy. And
oh, wow.
My job was not to board the pirate vessels, but we supported the boarding of the pirate vessels. So we would park the boat a little ways out, and then we would send these little search and rescue SARS boats out to the pirate vessels in order to board them and take them over. And so that's just what I thought about as you were describing your mavens, surreptitiously going on their little boat and boarding along the side. That's good. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, what about you? Have you had any recent play experiences?
Oh, yeah. Well, so I've been running a lot of the Between Ghosts of El Paso right now. That's the Weird Western spinoff game of the Between. And it's going great. I'm loving it. A lot of fun. What I'm really loving in general that I had not really anticipated is one of the playbooks is called The Inevitable. And The Inevitable is they are literally death. They are death incarnate. They are in the form of a mortal body, trying to figure out why they're in that form. And they have this ability to sort of converse with ghosts and corpses in ways that the other more human characters cannot do. But they also are trying to pretend to be a normal person in the community. They're not actually death, And it's a really terrific sort of setup for a character. It's a lot of fun. It's a great dynamic. Something I hadn't really anticipated, though, is the way that particular playbook interacts with some of the other kind of narrative and gameplay elements in the game. So a big feature of these games is that you frequently have questions posed to you, and these questions are meant to explore your character's backstory, right? And sort of where you came from. And it's really interesting to explore the backstory of a character who is death. And so...
yeah, those mask prompts on that character are insanely fun.
Yeah, they're super cool because it's looking into sort of the ancient world, with the other horsemen of the apocalypse and all this other stuff. It adds this really interesting mythical quality to the character, which is really fun. But we had a really great instance of it. The threat we were doing was called, I don't even remember the name of the threat, but it had an aspect of the Janus Mask called the Mask of Beauty on it. And the Mask of Beauty says, narrate a flashback to a time when you felt truly beautiful. And David, who was playing the character David Morrison, he narrated his inevitable as La Catrina, which is a sort of Mexican Day of the Dead kind of character, right? You might recognize the iconography. It's a sort of skeletal woman with marigolds in her hair and a big flat floppy hat, that kind of thing.
Flowers. Very striking figure, yeah.
Yeah. Very bright kind of fuchsia colors and things like that. So he described his inevitable, this grizzled, surly Western man, as this beautiful kind of Mexican Day of the Dead figure. And as a way of answering the question, the last time you felt truly beautiful. And I just loved it. I just thought it was such a great moment. And it just further kind of reinforced that this playbook has a different perspective than the other playbooks. And it adds it just adds so much interesting storytelling potential. And I think everybody was just kind of oh yeah, that's really cool. But yeah.
I think that is just a fantastic take on the idea of playing death. It definitely reminds me of, in more than a few instances, some of Neil Gaiman's work, American Gods in particular, different personas across different time periods. And the idea that death has been around since the beginning.
Right, yeah.
And of course, death is viewed differently in so many different cultures, and exploring that, what you may have once been versus what you are now, in general is just kind of like a microcosm for what makes this system, the Between, so good and delicious. But that's such a creative take. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and like something I've discovered in the Between, I mean, which is funny because I made the game, but like even then there's things you don't know about it until you play it a lot, right? And something I've discovered is you can have these playbooks they're really asymmetrical in a lot of ways, right? Like some of them are like clearly more powerful than the others.
The factotum.
Yeah. Some are like very ancient. Some are like very, like they just have, some are very mundane. Some are very magical. Mm-hmm. And they can all be together because the structure of the game makes each of their stories interesting no matter what, right?
Yeah.
And so the inevitable in Ghosts of El Paso just really, really highlights that. So yeah, I really love it. I suspect we'll have lots of opportunities in the future to talk about the Between and the Between Ghosts of El Paso.
Oh, we will have plenty of venue for that.
Indeed. Let's go on to our topic for today. So today, we're going to start with what I think is essentially the basics and the foundation for this entire podcast, which is the Brindlewood Bay mystery system, okay? Now, I want to start by just saying what Brindlewood Bay is. There's a chance that someone's listening to this and they don't know what it is. So Brindlewood Bay is a tabletop role-playing game about a group of elderly women, the Murder Mavens. They live in New England. They are called the Murder Mavens because they are fans of murder mystery books. And they spend their days in this quaint New England town, Brindlewood Bay, doing their hobbies and enjoying each other's company, reading mystery books, and, oh yeah, solving actual murder mysteries in their community.
Casually,
just a thing, right? Sort of a la Murder, She Wrote, the characters get wrapped up in actual murders that they have to like use their skills gained from reading so many mystery books. They have to use those skills to like solve the murders. The little twist of the knife in Brindlewood Bay is, as you're playing the campaign, the characters start to become aware that there is a sort of eldritch conspiracy going on in the background. This dark occult conspiracy connects these murders, and eventually the Murder Mavens are going to have to confront the evil cult. This cult is called the Midwives of the Fragrant Void. And so that's the whole game. It smashes up cozy crime drama, Murder, She Wrote, things like that, Agatha Christie, with cosmic horror, basically. It's Cthulhu, She Wrote, right? That's what this whole show is. This show is mystery and horror, right? That's what we're doing. And so in addition to the game's premise, I think the mystery system is kind of what makes the game stand out. I think it's what people, when they go to play this, maybe they're drawn by the premise, but what they kind of stay for is the mystery system, right? And the thing about this game is you're solving these murder mysteries, but these mysteries don't have canonical solutions. So the keeper, which is what we call the GM, has no idea who killed the victim, right? They don't know who did it. And indeed, the clues that the keeper has available to reveal to the players can be found anywhere the players are looking. So essentially, the characters just investigate however they want to investigate. The keeper will reveal clues that the keeper thinks would be cool to reveal at any given moment. And then once enough clues have been gathered, the players have a conversation, kind of like characters actually trying to solve a mystery. They sit down, they have a conversation, and then they incorporate the clues they've found into a theory of the case, and then they roll some dice to see if they're correct. That is the core of the mystery system. It's this sort of emergent mystery where there are no canonical solutions. The solutions are whatever the characters, or the players rather, come up with at the table using the clues that they found. And I just wanted to talk about, we can talk about the game in general, but also specifically the mystery system, because I think that it is the foundation of like a lot of what we're going to be talking about on this show. But also, I think it's cool and worth talking about. So,
it's absolutely what, hooked me originally. So I'd say so.
Well, so, okay, that's a great segue. I know you've run Brindlewood Bay. Just at a sort of high level, how has that gone? Like using the mystery system, like have you had a lot of good luck with that?
I've had a pretty good amount of luck with that. I have not done it on stream, but I have run a full Brindlewood Bay campaign with some friends of mine. And I've also run a lot of The Between, which uses that same mystery system. But in the case of Brindlewood Bay specifically, yeah, I'd say that it goes very well. It's very unique. It is a refreshing take on how to not just have fun coming up with theories, but exactly as you said, kind of emulate that feeling of deduction.
Right. Yeah.
We all read Sherlock Holmes, where it breaks down all of these little tiny details and how they fit together. Or, even, Hercule Poirot in an Agatha Christie story doing the same thing.
Mm.
But it's another thing to actually feel like you're getting the ball rolling, explaining how all the clues fit together. That is the most fun part. Even if there are certain areas that are like a little, I wouldn't say hit or miss gameplay wise, but certainly like not as strong as that satisfying conclusion can feel sometimes.
Mm.
Getting to theorize is so fun.
Yeah.
It is definitely my favorite part, especially when somebody throws you a curveball, an absolute wrench in the works of like, here's an idea, and everyone just kind of has to gasp and gape for a moment because, oh my God, that takes a theory in a whole other direction.
Right. Yeah.
In my experience, it's with both systems, but especially Brindlewood Bay, it's very fun. It makes you feel more creative in the long run, I feel. It definitely helps you expand on some ideas and kind of improve just throwing ideas out there. And all tabletop role-playing is improv, but it definitely makes you feel more confident, more strides you take in it as well, I'd say.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, good. I'm glad you've had those kinds of experiences with it. Yeah. I guess it might be helpful to kind of like talk about why the mystery system works this way.
Yeah. Where did this crazy idea come from?
Yeah, well, funnily enough, even though Brindlewood Bay was the first game to come out, the first game that I started developing between the two was The Between. Mm-hmm. The Between is a game that we've mentioned a couple times now, but it's a game about monster hunters in Victorian-era London, inspired by Penny Dreadful and things like that. And I was developing that game back in 2018, and I was running into this like problem where all the player-facing material, like all the playbooks, that stuff worked great. It was exactly how I wanted it to be. And even the mystery part of it worked well too. But the problem was it only worked because I could run it from my head. There was not like a structure there so that other keepers could do what I was doing, right? And so I just kind of kept the mystery in my head and then just sort of reacted as the players were like investigating. And so when I was developing The Between, I'm thinking, okay, well, this game is hopefully going to be played by other people. And so you need to like come up with a system and a structure to where anybody can pick it up and do it, right? And so I actually was running into a bit of a wall with the mystery system and how I wanted it to work. And what I was worried about was I was worried about having to basically rewrite The Between over and over as I revised the mystery system, right? And so I decided what I was going to do is I was going to make a smaller game, a game where the mysteries are more narrow in focus, because in The Between, the mysteries are all kinds of things. In the Brindlewood Bay, it's just murders. But in The Between, it's like all kinds of stuff, right? And so I was going to just try out the system with a smaller game with a smaller scope. And that's where Brindlewood Bay came from. I kind of asked out on Twitter. I was like, who has an idea for a murder mystery game that I can kind of fiddle around with? Like, just give me an idea. And I don't remember who said it, but somebody said, Murder, She Wrote, do like a classic cozy crime thing, And I was like, okay, yeah, that's cool. I can do that. I love those shows. I can do that. And then someone else said, wouldn't it be funny if it was also like Cthulhu? And I was like, whoa, that's it. That's the idea. And so I kind of took that idea, this Murder, She Wrote meets, Lovecraft, and I started developing it, and I eventually put it out. Yeah, and it was a great success, and it's, people have been really, really excited about it. We fast forward a few years later, and we had a really successful Kickstarter, and like, it's all been great. But it originally started as this, like a sketch for The Between.
Yeah, I noticed that because I found Brindlewood Bay entirely by happenstance. I was not aware of anything related to this whatsoever. I had no idea what the Gauntlet was. I had never, ever seen anything, right? And one day, just by sheer chance, I'm browsing an article for list of great games that are not Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I don't remember which website published this article, but I was just flipping through these games, seeing what cool options there were. And I have experience with other games. I was just curious to see what was being recommended in the now. And I saw this one little recommendation come up, said Brindlewood Bay. And it described exactly what you said. Old women solve murder mysteries. Also, there is Lovecraftian horrors present. Also, there's no canonical solution to the mystery. And I said, how the heck does that work? Immediately got it from drive-thru and read it, loved it, ran it a few times.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, I found The Between and realized how it was expanded on.
Right.
But it was so cool. This little tiny package, basically like a booklet about the length of what you'd actually get for a tourist guide to New England in size of like page count.
The original one was pretty short. Yeah. The original Brindlewood Bay is like 34 pages or something.
Which I'm sure has been expanded on with the published version that's coming out.
168, as it turns out.
Oh my God.
So, yeah.
Wow.
A lot of that's the mysteries, to be fair. But
yeah. Well,
that's just the one book too. So there's a whole other book as well. So,
Yeah, I found it and I just fell in love with it.
Okay.
I was reading how the mystery system works and I was like, oh, this is either going to go really, really well or really badly. And I'm glad that consistently every time it's gone really, really well. And it's just a cool idea.
Yeah, I worry about that a lot. Like, I know it works because I've run it and I've done it and I've watched other people play it. I've watched you run the Between. Like, I know it works. But in the back of my mind, I'm always like, man, I do worry a lot about people like, maybe not getting it, or maybe it may just not gel with their play style. Maybe they're accustomed to more like traditional mystery games, and that's okay.
Yeah, totally fine.
That's a different issue than just like people not really like understanding it, which I guess is part of the reason why we're doing this podcast.
Hey, let's talk about that.
To help, smooth things out for people. Yeah. But no, I'm happy that it's been kind of like consistently pretty good. I am curious though.
Shoot.
What is sort of your like experience just like more generally with like mystery tabletop role-playing games? And like, what was that transition like to go from like what I consider like, I call them more traditional mystery systems versus, the sort of Brindlewood Bay derived ones?
Well, I love traditional mystery games, mystery systems. I still play them in addition to any carved from Brindlewood game out there. I played a lot of Call of Cthulhu. I've also even run mysteries in Dungeons and Dragons, other systems as well.
Yeah.
There is this myth that you cannot run a mystery in a tabletop game, which is just not true.
Right,
it's just that people keep writing bad mysteries.
Well, I have thoughts about that, but yeah.
Yeah, we'll get into that, I'm sure. I'm more than happy to discuss that part. But yeah, I've had a lot of experience running traditional mystery games as well in other systems. And I still love that, but I also am head over heels for the mystery system you designed here because something I said earlier, it simulates deduction.
Right.
And that is a feeling that you can't really get anywhere else.
Yeah.
It specifically leans into, hey, we're going to snowball some crazy theories here and see what comes of it. And that's just fun.
Right.
The reason why I love the mystery system so much is because it's fun and is consistently entertaining. So both exist in my mind as things I love for very different reasons.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings on it. I have read and played and enjoyed Call of Cthulhu scenarios and Trail of Cthulhu scenarios. I have theoretically enjoyed all of them and sometimes enjoyed some of them. Like I have different experiences. I think I'll just throw out there one of my absolute favorite scenarios of all genres, all role-playing games, is a very old Call of Cthulhu scenario called The Secret of Castro Negro. And we've covered that on Fear of a Black Dragon. Classic Call of Cthulhu scenario. It's so good, but I would always run it using Cthulhu Dark. And Cthulhu Dark is one of the games that inspired Brindlewood Bay and the Between, mechanically at least. Cthulhu Dark doesn't have the emergent mystery system, but it does have this idea of finding clues wherever you look, right? Like that's something that Cthulhu Dark does. Yeah.
Similar to like Trail of Cthulhu, I know does something like that too. Where
Well, Trail of Cthulhu's whole thing is like you just always find the clue. Like there's no danger of not finding the clue, right?
Right.
But the clues are still in a specific place. There's just no danger of not finding them, right? But in any case, I really love a lot of the old Call of Cthulhu scenarios, but I would use like these lighter systems like Cthulhu Dark to run them because that's just how I prefer to play. As I kind of like got deeper into like mystery systems and what I like about the mystery genre and what I want out of a mystery role-playing game, I started to really like lean into and discover that what I really wanted was a mystery system that took advantage of the medium of tabletop role-playing games, right? This is kind of what I mean by that. I think that when you're watching a mystery TV show or a movie, or if you're reading a mystery book, those mediums have certain advantages that help deliver the mystery, right? So TV shows and films have like actors and visuals and music and all that stuff, right? Books have a forced perspective. Like you are definitely going to get everything in the order you need to get it because you are reading a book and there's only one way of reading it, When I think about role-playing games, in particular, role-playing games that try to structure the mystery in the same way that other mediums of entertainment do, I think there's a bit of a disconnect there because I think that sometimes that's not taking advantage of the medium of role-playing games. Because to me, what role-playing games do better than any other entertainment form is collaborative storytelling, right?
Right.
It is all about like a group of people sitting down at a table and your minds merging to some extent, like your creativity flowing and you're creating a story, right? That's like what I do this hobby for, right?
Yeah.
I love to sit down with other people and tell stories, and all people I think are good at telling stories. I think it's something that all people are good at to some degree or another. But role-playing games provide like enough scaffolding and procedures and mechanics to make the storytelling really excellent. Like I would put some of the stories I've done, actually many of the stories that groups I've been in have done in role-playing games, I would put that up there from just a pure substance standpoint, equivalent to like books and movies and TV shows, right? Like the stories are fantastic. We don't have all the production values. We don't have actors. We don't have scripts, but we're telling good stories, And so when I think about the medium of tabletop role-playing games, I think about collaborative storytelling. And I know that's where the Brindlewood Bay mystery system came from. It's like, how do we have a mystery system that harnesses the medium, the power of the medium? And I think that's what people respond to when they have good luck with it. Even if they don't know that's what they're responding to, I think that's what they're responding to when they say, wow, we had such a good experience. It's because Brindlewood Bay is leaning into what makes the hobby cool. What do you think about that?
I agree completely. That's at least why I found it cool and why I've continued to have a great time is exactly that. It's a game that really leans into, hey, we are sitting at a table. Hey, we are telling a story together. Hey, we are rolling dice. And all of us have different perspectives, different ideas, all equally valid in the same play space. And as you said, mind linking together, it's absolutely taking advantage, just like a seance, just connecting hands and just seeing into the ether.
Yes, exactly. Right. Yeah. It's all psychic vibes. I love it.
It's all psychic vibes. Exactly. This game is going to be opening many doors in many ways. But I have found that it does lean into that medium exactly as you've described it. Not every mystery game is going for that exact medium. In fact, more often than not, I find when a traditional mystery game tries to so strongly emulate how a book or a film does it, that's more often than not when it fails.
I think that's probably right. Yeah.
Because you can't, right? You don't have all the tricks of the trade you can pull out that a book or a movie does. This is its own specific type of medium that has its own kind of catch-alls and things that work and things that don't work. And it also helps that specifically this genre emulation you're going for, cozy murder mysteries in Brindlewood Bay and even, monster hunting in the between, that genre definitely benefits from there being this communal at the table narrative experience. Because I've said it a few times now, especially in this mystery genre like Murder, She Wrote, is the deduction element.
Yeah, yeah.
Even in television or the books itself, you see the procedural aspect of the protagonist putting it all together at the 11th hour and all the clues falling into place.
Yeah, yeah.
It emulates the genre in a satisfying way. So I would actually say, to compliment you is, this is probably the closest thing you will get to directly emulating how a TV show or a movie does it in terms of sheer feeling, how it feels when you're experiencing that at the table. I'd say that's actually emulating that pretty darn well.
Oh, good. I'm glad. I appreciate you saying that. And that's what I try to convey to people some people are very much into this idea of like, there is one solution and the fun for them is figuring out the solution. I can't do anything about that, right? Like there's nothing I can do about that.
Yeah, it's different strokes for different folks. Not everything is going to be to everybody's taste.
Yeah, it's just different. But what you might love, and you didn't know yet, is this, like you said, this deduction, this feeling, because you truly are coming up with a theory. And even though you're just rolling dice to see if you're correct, you still have to do the work. You still have to talk about it. You still got to come up with something that sounds plausible, So.
Well, that's a thing. I can't recall if this was explicitly written keeper advice or if it was just something I've heard you say before and it just works every time, is that, hey, the keeper should make sure everything checks out and really lean into like, can you explain this part a little bit more? Because I'm not sure I'm getting it yet. I'm not sure what this clue you contextualized is going for, which is super helpful. It doesn't feel like I've never had a theory come up where I walk away feeling like, well, I mean, I guess that worked. Every time it's like, oh, that worked, even if it's the most insane out there theory I've ever heard.
Right.
You know, at the table,
Yeah.
when we just kind of sit there and really mull it over, I walk away from that like, could not have seen that coming in a million years, but boy, does it feel good to hear.
I love it. Well, I feel pretty happy that we have sort of covered the mystery system in Brindlewood Bay pretty well. You know, in future episodes, I definitely want to talk a little bit more about some of the horror aspects of Brindlewood Bay. And also, you know, we're going to talk about the Between a lot, which is probably more horror than even mystery. But as a sort of kicking off point, I feel pretty good about that. Is there anything else you want to say about the mystery system in Brindlewood Bay?
Yeah, and I'll extrapolate on this in like, you know, future episodes, especially when we get into the Between. One thing I appreciate is how versatile, flexible the mystery system is itself, because we're seeing more and more carved from Brindlewood games coming out ever since you released Brindlewood and then the Between as well.
The pace is picking up, yeah.
The pace is really picking up, and some of these games are wildly creative. I mean, someone straight up made a Weird West game, and that turned into, you know, Ghosts of El Paso, and that is awesome.
Right, yeah.
But I like how the mystery system is flexible enough. You get the whodunit aspects in Brindlewood Bay, but that also works the exact same with very little difference going into the questions and answers system. It's no longer a whodunit, which suspect is the culprit in the Between, but instead, especially like the multi-layered approach of the questions and answers, different ways you can explain aspects of what's going on.
Right.
It is the same system, but it really applies to so many different genres and territories, and it's, as far as I've played and seen thus far, fun in every one.
Yeah, the key for the hacks, especially if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh, I want to hack Brindlewood Bay or the Between.
Please do it. It's the easiest thing.
Yeah, I think it's great. But the key, though, is that there does need to be a sort of fundamental activity the characters are engaging in, you know?
Yeah.
And it should be an investigatory, is that a word?
It is.
Investigatory behavior or action. But as long as you have that, it doesn't matter what you're investigating, right? It could be, you know, Jim Crocker is working on a street level supers, you know, investigation game called Escapes. I know that we haven't really talked about this publicly much, but you and Meg are working on a sort of mystery Stardew Valley kind of thing, which I'm very excited about.
Oh, yeah.
I'm deep in the middle of 2 games right now. One is my creepy public access TV station game.
Simply cannot tell you how excited I am by that concept.
It's going great too. I'm really happy with it so far. And then also the Assault Versus podcast role-playing game. Like there's a lot coming, right? And there's lots of cool stuff out there. Oh, Jason Burns is it's a game called The Stanley, which is inspired by The Shining, right? Yeah. Like, so if your genre is mystery and or horror, I think this system is really good. I think
Definitely
this mystery system is going to support you. Yeah, absolutely. But we'll be talking about a lot of that stuff in the future, I think, a lot.
Absolutely. We got to save some content for future episodes. But I mean,
absolutely.
This podcast is serving 2 functions. One, to talk about the system, and also, hey, join the Discord, because there's all this really cool creative stuff that you can see the development being posted in regular updates.
Absolutely. Yeah. And my hope is that in this podcast, we will get to really explore the full range of like everything that's out there. Yeah. Right. Like, I think that's going to be really exciting and fun. Well, that was great. Let's go to the next segment. We want to wrap up every episode with just some media recommendations, particularly leading into mystery and horror, just to kind of bring it home to our core genres here. And so, Alex, what are you recommending today?
Yeah, absolutely. In thinking about Brindlewood Bay mystery and that cozy vibe, I started watching it last year when it first came out, and I've been catching up on it recently, is the Hulu television series Only Murders in the Building.
Oh, I want to watch it so bad. I have not seen it.
It's so good and fun. It's a romp. It's a fun, silly, creative take on a true crime mystery being investigated by amateurs.
Okay, good.
You know, the main premise is that, hey, there's somebody dies in this New York City apartment complex, and these 3 completely different people who all love the same true crime podcast end up coming together and being like, well, we could do that. They start their own podcast trying to figure out, hey, who killed this tenant in our building? And it is funny. It is crazy. And the mystery is actually really good.
Okay. Yeah.
I had several episodes where I'm just like, oh my God. So I feel like it hits that vibe for Brindlewood Bay, especially of just ragtag group of people, absolute amateurs stepping on the toes of the police, solving a mystery.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I've been wanting to watch it. The only reason I haven't seen it yet is because I don't have Hulu, and so it's not always in my face. So if I don't just like make a note, like go to Hulu and watch this show, yeah, that's exciting. What's your other recommendation?
My other recommendation is a podcast I'm not sure if many people have heard of. I found it completely by happenstance while working. It is a podcast that started back in 2019 and is still going infrequently, but still going today. It is called A Voice from Darkness. This definitely leans more into the horror side of the horror mystery thing we've been examining here. But it is essentially a fictional podcast framed as if it is the late night radio show of this guy. I think his title is a parapsychologist named Dr. Malcolm Ryder.
Okay.
His show involves segments discussing weird history in America. And he also does these call-in segments where people call in with their, paranormal goings on in their lives. Some of them are funny, but most of them are genuinely terrifying.
Okay.
And how he is like guiding them and helping them solve their problems. There are a lot of episodic elements to it, which, definitely plays into the, Murder, She Wrote, Brindlewood Bay thing. But there is this overarching conspiracy narrative in the background of a bunch of events that are being linked together. Yeah. The world building it is very cool. Definitely recommended. I believe it's by a gentleman by the name of Jack Reese, and the voice actor who plays Dr. Malcolm Ryder. It's like you're listening to a somewhat creepier version of Willem Dafoe. He just has this voice. It's enthralling. It's really good. And it definitely gives you those creepy conspiracy vibes. Yeah.
It's like Creepy Frasier.
It is absolutely like Creepy Frasier. What about you? What recommendations have you got for us?
I've got books this week. So here's a little bit of, I think this is important context in a way. I went to law school a long time ago, like 11 years ago. And for years after that, I didn't want to read for pleasure because when you're in law school, you get tired of reading. And so you just like stop reading for pleasure. It's a thing that happens across the board. And so I would go like whole years only reading like maybe 2 books. If I was lucky, like I'd maybe get 2 books done. But this year I have managed I just finished my 31st book this year. And so I'm really, really excited about that.
Oh my God.
Yeah. I'm like really happy about the pace I've been reading. And so I've got a couple of book recommendations, and together they kind of like give me Brindlewood Bay vibes for different reasons. The first is a 1978 horror novel called The House Next Door. This is by Anne River Siddons. And I don't want to spoil it too much, but this book, it's about a couple in a suburb of some big southern city. They make it seem like it's Atlanta, but I don't think they ever actually say the name of the city. But in any case, it feels like Atlanta. And they are a sort of upper middle class couple. And a lot of the book is like them just being kind of bougie and like having cocktail parties, in the hot southern summer evenings, and just doing like whatever kind of slightly wealthy Southerners did in the late 70s, right? It almost feels like Designing Women. It's got Designing Women vibes.
Oh, very cool. Yeah. But
this couple builds a house next to their house in the empty lot. And the house is fucking evil. So the novel is about basically all the different people over the years who move into this evil ass house and who get driven away from it because of its evil. And the main character, the woman who lives next door to this evil house, she's just like getting drawn deeper and deeper into like, what is the deal with this house? Like, why does this house do this? Like, what is causing this to happen? But also, so you have this like kind of horror story, but you also have this like really interesting like story about community and like, lawn parties and cookouts. It's a nice mix. And it gives me Brindlewood Bay vibes because it kind of mixes the tones of like, people just sort of enjoying their lives in picturesque settings, women enjoying their lives in picturesque settings. But then you have this like strong horror element like right there in your face, So I really love that.
So it's basically if you kit bashed The Designing Women and The Haunting of Hill House into one product.
That is almost a perfect explanation of what it is. So if that sounds fun to you listeners, go do that. The other book I'm going to recommend is called The Fisherman. This is a 2016 novel by John Langan. This is a really quick read. You can probably knock this one out in like 2 sittings if you try. But it is a really, really fresh take on the cosmic horror genre. Cosmic horror genre, of course, very important to Brindlewood Bay. And I think Brindlewood Bay is a very fresh take on cosmic horror also. But this book is a fresh take on the cosmic horror genre. I don't want to say too much about it. except to say that if you have been familiar with the tropes of Lovecraftian horror, of cosmic horror, of weird fantasy, and you just want something different, The Fisherman is so, so good, and you can knock it out in no time flat. Like, it's a really great read. So, with all that said, I think that's our show.
Woo!
Listeners, The Darkened Threshold is a production of The Gauntlet. You can find The Gauntlet on Twitter at GauntletRPG. Our website is gauntlet-rpg.com. And if you'd like to support the show, we have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/gauntlet. Alex, where can folks find you?
You can find me on Twitter over at Xander Bimsky, and on YouTube and Twitch, Critical Failsafe, where we stream games like The Between and other systems as well. Much more to come, and yeah.
Awesome. And we don't know who our editor is yet, but thank you, editor, for editing the show.
You nameless being from whence you came.
You ominous, nameless being, right? Yeah.
The Dark Conspiracy of the Darkened Threshold podcast.
Exactly. And thank you so much, listeners. Take care.